Hi guys, what's going on, and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be talking through a Theatre of Pain 11, just talking through the general pulls I do, what I'm having to do on each pack and things like that. So we get into the first pull, and because I'm a Druid, I'm going to be focusing on the Bloodhorn for this fight. He does an AoE damage called Raging Tantrum, which we're going to try and soothe off just as and when we can. It's pretty painful, it's really something you want to pay attention to. The contenders also enrage, so they're also ones that you're going to want to pay attention to. If they start doing too much damage, you can either soothe them, but I didn't want to risk not having a soothe for the Bloodhorn, or you can kite them around. Either way, it's pretty easy. Now, we're getting into the first boss, and the first boss does a fair bit of damage, but the main part is the Dacia also does two different tank mechanics. One is Mortal Strike, which if you're familiar with PvP at all, Mortal Strike reduces your healing by 30% as well as doing a fair bit of damage by itself. He also does Slam, which in itself does a fair bit of damage. On Tyrannical Weeks, it really does hurt. Your main goal as a tank in this fight, though, aside from avoiding the poison, is trying to keep the bosses grouped as often as possible so that you can AoE them. It really does make a difference, and the more you can do this, the happier your group will be. There is a fair bit of movement, unfortunately, but that's just something you're going to have to try and avoid. You do get Zera pop up, which is the rogue trying to stun people. It shouldn't be your job as a tank to interrupt it, but if you have something, then absolutely use it. For me, you saw me use Incapacitating Roar at the start of the fight, just because why not? As soon as Patron goes down, we're going to go to Zav. Zav is definitely the core you want to be starting with. They're both pretty easy bosses. We use Bloodlust on the first boss. You don't need a Bloodlust on the second boss, which will obviously be Zav, because you'll have Prideful. The third boss, you'll have Prideful and Bloodlust because it's quite difficult. Third boss will be going Koltharok. That'll help us murder that boss down before anyone can take too much damage. The fourth boss, you will only have Prideful, and the fifth boss, you'll then have Prideful. You'll then have Bloodlust only. So you get a good mix of something on every single boss. Now, as you can see, I've pulled everything together here. You don't have to do this, and actually it does lead to a couple of deaths in our group. I think if you've got a strong healer and a strong tank, this shouldn't be too much of an issue. However, if either one of lacking, if the tank's taking too much damage, or if the healer's not being able to keep the group topped up, then you're going to have an issue, and you should probably just pull this one pack at a time. Now, I actually just stood up there as well, which is probably not going to help the fight. So as you can see in a second, we've got the Demon Hunter that's just been seeded, and I do believe somehow the priest dies. I think he gets hit by a shade as well. Between the two, you really shouldn't be dying on this. The shades are kiteable, and the Demon Hunter died to the AoE damage. Again, that's what I'm saying about if you have a strong healer. I had faith in this group, and we kind of managed it. Now, the Whirlwind's pretty easy. You just stand out of it. The second mini boss is also going to spawn you a Prideful, and he's going to add a few extra mechanics to what we've just seen there. So you've got the Interrupting Roar, which does kick everybody if you're casting, as well as AoE damage. He does Colossus Smash, which is a tank mechanic, does a fair bit of damage and increases your damage taken by, I believe, 30% or 50%. He also does Ground Smash, which you can just get out of. The whole mini boss in total isn't really an issue. Again, we have the whole group here. As soon as this dies, we're going to go for Prideful. We haven't got loads of space here, but we have got a fair bit. Just something to note, obviously, if you're trying to do Theatre of Pain, especially if you're trying to do it at a higher level, you do want to bring a Necrolord along with the extra 10% versatility per the second, third, and fourth boss is very nice, as well as the increased movement speed. So we're going to kill this Prideful here, which gives us a buff for the next pack. The next pack in itself isn't too difficult, but the captain does reduce the damage taken by everything around him. I'm not sure, I believe that's AoE damage only. So you want to just focus the captain here. Obviously, I'm a druid, so everything's thrash based for me, but for other classes, you want to focus down the captain, then AoE everything else down, which is what we've done here. Now, we still have about 30 seconds of that buff going into the end of this one and the next mini boss. The next mini boss will also spawn a Prideful. This is why this route's really nice. Killing this mini boss again adds an extra few mechanics as well as the ones we've seen before, other than Colossus Smash. That gets replaced with Unbalancing Blow, I believe it's called, which reduces your parry, dodge, and block chance by 100%. That's really difficult for anything that's based on that. So for Druids, obviously we're based on dodges quite a bit. You don't want to take that as often as you can, but you can't really avoid it. So just be aware that you might need to use a defensive or two on this boss. He also does swift strikes, which I believe that's what it's called, which is like sweeping strikes for a warrior. It just does AoE damage to everyone else around him. We then get another Prideful, which we're going to use to run into the boss. Now it's really, really key. As soon as this Prideful deck goes down, doesn't matter what health you're on, doesn't matter what mana you're on, you just run into the boss and go crazy. And the reason for that is you get a minute-long buff. You want to use as much as that as possible on the boss. Now, Zav has a couple of different mechanics. The first one that we're going to focus on is the banner, the oppressing banner. That's really, really important. It basically makes the whole fight. If you see a banner come up, kill it. That's as important as it gets. If you see a banner come up, you kill it. And the reason for that is because it does a lot of... while it doesn't do a lot of damage in itself, it causes a lot of slow movement, which makes the dance almost impossible while it's up. The dance in itself, he does a single side blow, he does a line, and he does a circle around himself. Shouldn't be hard to avoid any of it as long as the banner isn't up. He also does brutal combo, does a lot of tank damage. You may need to use a cooldown for that. And obviously we have the dueling, which as a tank you'll never need to worry about. But as a group and whole, you should just have a focus on who's going to take it if you do go down. That's because you get 10% damage on one DPS and minus 10% on the other. As you see, I was slower there because I used my trinket and I stood in the mechanic. This is on a plus 11. I didn't die. In fairness, only took about 15% of my health. You can just stand in them, but your healer might not thank you. So we killed that, and we're now going to go and do a little bit of a different route here. The first one we're going to do is the first pull in Plague Quarter. Now this is because we want to get a Prideful before Koltharok, and this is the way to do it. So we're going to pull the first group. You can pull this whole room here if you're feeling brave. I wasn't. It's not a hard pull, and as long as you get the interrupts and kicks on the Sludge Sweeper, or Sludge Spewer, sorry, you shouldn't have to worry about all too much. As soon as the main group goes down and the horror's left, I should go and pull the next pack. You shouldn't need to just focus him down. Again, the only thing dangerous here is the Sludge Spewer. Now, if you have a Necrolord in your group, tell them not to take the banner at this point. You want to leave it for when you're about to go to the boss. You want to use your banner in each of the wings as you get to them. You don't want to try and keep it up for as long as possible. So we kill this boss here, and that's going to give us around, I think it's like 52 or 53%. Let's see what we get to. Okay, so 50%. So that's your aim for before you go to the Soul Quarter. You want 50.55%. You then go to the Soul Quarter, and on the last platform you will get a Prideful, but we'll talk about that in a second. Now, if you have a Necro, you want to use the banner straight away. This is really, really painful. So what I do is I pull the first big group into the first corridor, we nuke them all down, AoE stuns, AoE interrupts, incapacitating roar, anything like that. Maybe even use a cooldown or two here. It's very painful, and obviously on a Spiteful week, you're going to get the ghosts as well. We actually did this really well. A lot of the damage is tank damage if you can get the interrupts off, which for me personally I didn't find too much of an issue even on a fortified week. But if you don't get the interrupts off, you can get a lot of group damage, and that's something to be aware of. So I pull the rest then into the next side, and I think this is probably the cleanest way you could do it like this. You want to make sure you get all of the souls here. You can actually miss one by accident. He doesn't always like to pull with the group. Again, if they all stack up nicely, you should just be able to nuke them all AoE down. Now they die really quickly, but we do have high DPS in this group. So while we do have a couple of deaths, we do have high DPS. Again, a couple of ghosts spawn. It's not exactly a lot of space, but you're going to have less space to manage them in a second. So now's a good time to get to learn how you're going to deal with the CC and things like that. We go into the next pack here, which is the Portal Guardian. As a tank, you haven't really got to worry about anything. As a Druid, you have Remove Curse, which the boss does the mini-boss does a mechanic on someone where he puts an increased damage taken curse. You want to make sure you try to kick that, decurse that as quick as possible. It does a lot of damage, especially when you have Soulstorm. We're also going to get the next Prideful, so you don't want to leave the curse up for that either. Again, this Prideful, you can't really avoid it spawning here, unfortunately. It's not particularly useful. It's just something you're going to have to manage. You can go left or right here. It doesn't really make a massive difference to the grand sort of percentage. I personally prefer right. Just because there's only 2 mobs, they both got the same health, you haven't got to worry about the ghost being kind of annoying. The only difference is between the two is you probably need more priority kicks on the bone mages. So we get them down, we don't actually kill them at the same time, so the shades are a little off from each other. Just be careful as a tank here, you can actually go through without getting in combat because the shades don't focus you. I have done it a couple of times where I've kind of jumped through, and it's pretty difficult. And as you can see here, I'm actually warning my group that the last platform is pretty stressful. I do think we have a couple of deaths in this quarter, which again, you shouldn't really. The Soulbinder in here, you should just be interrupting the necrotic bolts, especially the volley. The volley does make or break this pull. It will almost one-shot your entire group on a fortified week, especially if you've got the curse on. Once you get to the Guardian, it's just about dealing with the Soulstorm. That's AoE healing as much as you can do, really. As you can see, I actually jump out of bear then to help heal there. It does get quite stressful. The Mages, again, can one-shot someone by themselves if you make a mistake. So you really got to be careful. Again, we get everything down. I'm going to help DPS the Shade, and we're going to go left now. Again, you can go left or right, your choice. It doesn't make a difference in terms of percentage. In fact, I believe you get more percentage going right, which you don't really want, ultimately, because this route gives you a Prideful pull just before the 4th boss, and that's perfect. Obviously, this pull in itself isn't particularly nice, and I do think this is where we start getting a couple of deaths. You've just got to avoid the winds. As a tank, you'll take every Spirit Frost to yourself. As long as you can survive it, you haven't got to worry. And again, I'm decursing here. There's lots of curses in this dungeon, and if you can get rid of them all, brilliant. A Boomkin or a Guardian Druid or a Feral Druid, all very, very good in this dungeon because we have the decurse and the soothes. So we get one down. The healer did die there just because of a bit of a lag. I mean, we're not taking very much damage outside of that, so you do see there's not much damage if you do the mechanics correctly. Now, we're going to go into potentially the hardest pull of this dungeon here. We did it very messy. As you can see, I'm actually having to wait for the healer. It's not great. But I've started Bloodlust in this next pull. It doesn't change when your Bloodlusts are going to be. You're still going to have it back up from the last boss. But it's probably the most important pull if you get it right. So again, there's the knockoff dude, there's Soulbinders, and there's a Bone Magus. The priority here is interrupt the Soulbinders when he does the volley, and make sure the Magus doesn't get his Bone Spear off. Bone Spear is the one that does a lot of damage, and you want to make sure that never gets off. So we nuke down the Soulbinder. What I would suggest is actually try to kill these not all at the same time. As soon as a Shade spawns, you want to actually just nuke the Shade as quick as you can. We kill the next Shade, and as you can see, people are getting knocked off. There's a lot of AoE damage, and people didn't really follow all the mechanics. So we're left with 2 of us and a Prideful. Not great. So the Prideful is going to kill us here. There's nothing we can do about it, so I jump off just to save time. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to skip back to when we're back at that platform. And we're back. So, as you can see, we've got 15 minutes 30 here, roughly. We've done most of the trash now, but I was truthfully thinking we weren't going to time this. Now, if you actually look at it at the end, I'll be spoilers, we do time it by quite a bit. It's honestly, there's so much here, and it's such an easy dungeon to do and time. People really panic when they get to this stage. If you don't, and you just stick with it and go through, you shouldn't have too much of an issues. So we kill this Prideful. Again, there's not much space, but if you watch my Prideful video coming out soon, you'll realise how to do this, and you won't need very much space. Now we go to the boss. Make sure to always click the portal switcher. If you do happen to wipe, at least you can run back quickly. We are going to have about 40 seconds of Prideful for this. We just want to nuke it down. Since the nerfs on this boss, it's not actually all too hard. You should be able to do it without too much of an issue. There's 2 hands that spawn now. You will get 2 souls. You can both go in the same one, or you can go in separate ones. It doesn't really matter here. Now, as you can see there, Guardian Druids don't do all too much damage, but we can help heal with Resto Affinity quite a lot. As soon as he starts doing Draw Soul, I actually hot them people up. If they make a mistake, as you see the Demon Hunter does here, he's going to take a fair bit of damage, and the hots that I'm doing are actually ticking for nearly 1,000 a tick. As you saw, 1 crit then for nearly 2,000. That's going to really help the healer if you can just help him like that. As you can see, the priest goes and stacks in the other hands. Don't stack behind them because your soul can run out at weird angles. Just go and stand in them. They don't do all too much damage. And it takes much less damage doing it this way than it would if you do it the wrong way. So we kill this boss, again, nice and easy now, not too much healing needed. I'm still healing myself quite a lot, and healing group as well. That's what Guardian Druids do. So we're going to go to Gore Chop now. We've got 12.5 minutes left, and as you can see, I've just told the group we've got 10 minutes to kill Gore. It takes about 2.5 to 3 minutes to kill the last boss. Should be no reason we shouldn't be able to time this like this. So we go through, I pull this pack. I hate this pack because this is where groups just make silly mistakes and interrupts. Everyone interrupts the first one, the second one then goes off and the group wipes. But kill one Sludge Spewer just very quickly and it leaves the other one that you can manage on its own. That's the tactic I use. The Plague Belcher by himself doesn't really do too much, or the Putrid Butcher actually. Doesn't really do too much and you can just avoid what he does as a tank. You should just be able to ignore his damage. Now, we want to skip the next one, and that's not because it's difficult or anything like that. It's actually because it throws the percentage off. If you kill him, you're going to get Prideful a pack earlier. And as you can see, most of my group didn't get through, so I was a bit worried that they were just going to walk in and pull him, which is why I paid attention. But again, so if you do it, you will actually get Prideful a pack earlier, which means you will get less Prideful on the boss, if any at all. Now, that's not ideal, so you do want to skip him. You'll still get enough percentage, and you'll be able to get it then just on the boss. This pull here, again, the Diseased Horror does actually a lot of kind of stacking damage on you, as well as Meat Shield on himself. You want to interrupt Meat Shield as soon as possible. It's just annoying, and the ad ends up lasting forever. As you can see, I pulled the gas bag back here. This is so you have more space. It's a really horrible thing to fight in that straight corridor, because if he goes up and down, you have to be stood almost on top of him to do it. But we're going to get him down here as quick as we can. Again, the eruption's coming out. As soon as this starts getting low, I should take him into the corridor here. There was a lot of poison. I didn't want to run through the poison because my healer seemed to be struggling, so I waited till it died. We go and pull everything together. Again, you can pull the other two mobs with this. I don't tend to, because you will get Prideful as soon as everything here dies, and I don't want the group to be behind when I do that. You should focus the Sludge Spewer, but everything else is non-elite, so it's just going to die pretty quickly. I actually mark the Disease Horror here. This is because if you don't focus him and he gets the meat shields off, he actually lasts for ages, and you don't really want to unbalance them. So I'd rather kill the Disease Horror. You don't get Prideful until both die, so you don't have to worry so much about that. Again, not lots of space for Prideful, but you shouldn't need it if you do it right. I'm going to help kill the Shade. During Spiteful weeks, it's really important that tanks are helping with this, just because they're really annoying for melee. As ranged, if you're getting hit by them, how? Honestly. So we kill the Prideful, again, very simple, and Prideful should be seen like this as just ways to nuke bosses quicker. At this point right now, we've got 8 minutes left. I know personally that we can time this. Should take about 2 to 3 minutes per boss. We should have 2 minutes left over. Perfect. It's not a 2 chest, but that's because we made too many mistakes as a group and we weren't pulling things efficiently enough. And when I say pulling things efficiently enough, it's not the route. It's that you would pull 2 or 3 mobs at a time, and or 2 or 3 packs at a time, that things start getting a little bit interesting. Again, a little bit more DPS and no mistakes. We'd have probably 2-chested this, not a problem, with this group currently. So this boss has a Hateful Smash. It does a lot of damage on the tank. You just got to be aware of it. Hateful Strike, sorry. On Tyrannical Weeks, that does a lot of damage. As a tank, just save your cooldowns, mitigation for it. You really, really have to, otherwise you will get one shot and not know where it came from. The ads themselves, they drop poison when they die. You can see I stood in the hooks. Don't do that. Healer won't like you. The ads drop goo when they die. Just try to drop them over to the side if you can. Now, this took us 1 minute 9 seconds because we had Prideful for the start of it. Obviously, it isn't a Tyrannical Week, but we had Prideful for the start of it. So we've now got 6 minutes to kill the last boss. We have plenty of time. Don't need to panic. Even though we only had 14 minutes once we got to the third boss, we had plenty of time. So again, the main thing for this key is don't panic. You have lots of time and you don't have to worry about things. Now, if you look where I'm going to stand for this boss, other than the fact he'll spawn right next to me, you can actually pull it straight into this corner. It's not necessarily that corner specifically that's safe. It's just corners in general, because you get to see where the ad's going to spawn and you move around them. You get the most amount of time stood in a corner. Now, in the first phase, you get Reaping Scythe, which does tank damage. You also get the Dark Devastation, which is the beam. You also get the Rift with the ads. Now, the first Rift you'll get ads, the second Rift you won't, the third you also will. That spawned right on top of us. Now, if you look how we actually do these first ads, completely accidental, but that's how you want to do them. Very, very easy if you get them all set like that and you can just AoE them down. You don't want to leave them up too long because they do a lot of damage. So we kill the beam again, or we ignore the beam again, and we get back onto the boss. We want to push the boss to 50% before he does his third Rift, because his third Rift is where we get ads. And that's not fun. So Echoes of Carnage is the 50% mechanic on Mythic. You want to pop Bloodlust on all your cooldowns here and just nuke the boss down. Reaping Scythe, again, you can see it does a lot of damage. It does shadow and melee damage, physical damage. You don't want to take it very often if you can avoid it. And if you do, you want to use a cooldown to survive it. So we see where we're standing at the moment. We got to see where all the ads were and avoid them without being hit. And we're just going to carry on, nuke the boss down now, ignore the ads entirely. 50k and we just nuke. So we killed the boss. We had about 3 minutes, I believe, past 2 chesting it. It wasn't too much, but we should have been able to do it, not a problem. As you can see, I get some loot, nice and shiny for my boomy spec, happy days. The damage was all around the 4.5k mark. And again, guys, going to leave it here. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you later. Goodbye.